Have you ever felt like nothing gets done unless you are there to make the decisions? That's exactly the problem that David Marquet solved on the USS Santa Fe. Today, I'll give you the single phrase that he used to change everything. G'day BookTube, you're here with Nick, the Renaissance Bookman, and today I'm going to be looking at Turn the Ship Around, the single best leadership book that I have ever read. David Marquet was the captain on the nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Santa Fe. When he took command, the Santa Fe was known as the worst submarine in the fleet. Morale was low, performance was low, and staff retention was abysmal. Yet Marquet instilled a leader-leader culture in lieu of the traditional leader-follower model, and within 12 months, the ship's performance went from last to first. The traditional leader-follower model is exactly what we are probably already thinking about when we hear the word leadership. It's a charismatic leader standing out, giving directions, and then a group of people, the followers, acting out on those directions. By contrast, a leader-leader model is one in which everyone in the group is actively engaged in trying to solve the problem, where people in the group have genuine control over their area of expertise and the associated responsibilities and trust that comes with it. It's an empowerment program on steroids. The submarine is actually a perfect environment for the leader-follower model, for that traditional top-down authoritative sword hand style culture. There is no downtime. There is no space for creativity. The boss is never more than 150 feet away, so why not just go and ask them? Yet Marquet bravely flipped convention on its head. So why is this leadership book different to others? And how does it earn the title of the best leadership book that I've ever read? Turn the Ship Around is all about Marquet's efforts to introduce his leader-leader culture. The book chronicles the practical measures that he introduced to counter all the naysayers, all those resistant to change. It is these practical measures and how easily they can be applied to a non-military setting that sets this book apart. What I love about this book is that you don't have the same philosophical musings with examples drawn from the Stoics and World War II generals that I've come to typically expect from leadership books. Instead, Marquet walks through one clear story arc about him taking command of the worst submarine in the fleet, preparing the crew for deployment, and then subsequently deploying 150 days later. It's that clear story that you can follow from start to finish as he implements initiatives, changes language, and implements programs. Marquet identified one key component, one critical requirement for his leader-leader culture to be successful. And that is, in one word, control. It was critical that he push control, push decision authority down the chain of command as far as possible. The issue with that, though, is that all the naysayers would then say that you're going to jeopardize safety and output. To make sure that wasn't being reduced in any way, he came up with a whole number of other initiatives, and these can be labeled under two different pillars, one of competence and another pillar of clarity. Control, clarity, competence. Now, to create that leader-leader model, he needed leaders all the way down the chain of command. Everyone on board the ship needed to be a leader, not a follower. So to create the leaders at the lower levels, Marquet needed to divest as much control that rests with him down the chain of command to his middle managers. Now, when I say control, I'm not talking merely about the responsibility to supervise a task. No, but rather giving them space to use their creativity, to use their initiative to decide how to complete a task and when it should be scheduled and what resources are needed. That's the type of control we're talking about. Marquet's intent was to have all 135 crew members on board the Santa Fe thinking for themselves, rather than having 134 sitting by idly waiting for the commanding officer to tell them what to do, because that would be the leader-follower model. Marquet called this, don't move information to authority, move authority to information. Now, I think we can all resonate with this principle. I'm sure we've all been in a situation where we've come up with a really good idea at work, but we need the boss's authority to be able to actually execute on the task. So we compile our thoughts, we put together some sort of presentation, and we take it to the boss to get their approval to do the thing that we've probably already decided is objectively the correct way to go forward. And I'm sure we've all been in that situation as well, where after the presentation, the boss still says no. And you sit back and you're just like, oh, that must have been on me. I mustn't have explained it well enough. Because if he understood, or if they understood all the data that I have and all the information that I have, then surely no one would have made that mistake. No one would have said no. Pushing authority down the chain of command to where the information sits eliminates this inefficiency. The example that Marquet uses in Turn the Ship Around is one about leave approvals. You wouldn't believe it, but on board the Santa Fe, it took 14 signatures to approve a few days' leave for a junior sailor. Now that is absolutely asinine. What a waste of time. And so what was happening? A whole bunch of junior sailors were not getting their leave. Or by the time it got approved, flights were too expensive and they couldn't take it. How do you think that was going to impact morale? And so instead of trying to speed up that process, make that process more efficient by getting all the way through those 14 signatures, Marquet just simply went, no. Who should be making this decision? The petty officers. And he instilled his middle managers the authority to be able to make that decision. Now, making that decision in isolation probably isn't good enough. What he also then needed to do is give them the information they needed to make good decisions. The petty officers then needed to be in charge of things like the ship's maintenance. When were those junior sailors going to be required for time-critical tasks? They also need to be responsible for all the watch duties. For how could they adequately assess the validity of that leave request if they couldn't articulate the operational implications of approving it? The net result was Marquet's middle managers were now actively and intimately involved in the planning of the day-to-day operations of the ship. In the past, this all rested with the CO and XO, but not anymore under the leader-leader model where control was pushed down the chain of command. How much more buy-in, more ownership was able to be achieved by such a simple redistribution of authority? And the junior sailors, they loved it. They got quicker feedback on whether or not they could take leave. They were more motivated because they could then look at their petty officers and see the respect that they were given, the authority that they were given. That is worth hanging around in the Navy for. Morale was up, efficiency was up, but most importantly, for me, bureaucracy was down. Pushing authority to the person with the information is the first aspect of control. And now for the second. Introducing the all-powerful sentence that will revolutionize your leadership. I intend to. One of the examples that Marquet uses in Turn the Ship Around is one where the officer of the deck would come to the commanding officer and request permission to submerge the ship. This was happening all of the time, and it would require this back and forth, as Marquet would then have to ask all these questions to confirm that they had done all of their jobs and that it was appropriate to submerge the ship. So Marquet made a decision. He decided that he was no longer going to issue any of these orders. He changed their language. I forbid you from using the word request permission or may I. Instead, you must use the phrase I intend to. I would like to know what you want to do, what you intend to do, and give you ownership over that action. But just changing that phrase from request permission to I intend to wasn't enough. They still had to have that back and forth to convince the commanding officer that it was the appropriate thing to do. So instead, he sat there in silence and said, what do you think I'm thinking about right now? And that gave the officer of the deck the opportunity to go, well, I guess you're wondering whether or not it's safe to do so, whether all our checklists are complete, whether everyone's below deck. And they had this back and forth. And in that, Marquet was able to teach the officer what it was that he, as the commanding officer, was thinking about. He was able to increase this officer's organisational understanding. And so ultimately, what it ended up sounding like was something like this. Captain, I intend to submerge the ship. We are in water we own, water depth has been checked and it's 400 feet. All men are below, the ship is rigged for dive and I've certified my watch team. And the commanding officer would simply look back at him and say, with no further questions to ask, very well. And all of those actions would then be carried out and the ship would be submerged. In doing this, he was teaching his subordinates to think like him. And if we can do the same and teach our subordinates to anticipate what questions we're going to ask them when they come and request permission, not request permission, state what they intend to do, how much more likely are they to then take the initiative and actually go solve all of those problems before they even come to us? This subtle change in language pushes authority, it pushes ownership, and it increases organisational understanding down the chain of command. It creates leaders at a lower level than was previously there. Importantly, not followers. The phrase, "I intend to," it turns passive followers into active leaders. Marquet had a whole bunch of other initiatives under that control, competence, clarity, to combat the naysayers and get people on board, to create that cultural change. But that's for you to read. I want you to pick the book up and discover those in time. I will give you a little teaser, if you will, of some of the other ones that I really enjoyed without going into great details. One that I liked was Achieve Excellence, Don't Just Avoid Errors. And what came hand in hand with that was the premise of don't practice until you get something right. Practice until you cannot get it wrong. Recognize success immediately. Very important. Another one that I liked, and this was all about creating long-term mindsets, creating long-term thinking, where he would hold regular meetings in a one-on-one fashion with his core group of leaders. So him at the top, the next 6 or so people that are directly under him. And this is something that you and I can absolutely do. And in that meeting, he refused to talk about the day-to-day things. Leaky taps, things that need to be changed, we were not allowed to talk about them. We are only talking about your long-term goals, your long-term plans. What are you hoping to achieve in 2 years or 3 years' time? And how can I help you do it? I liked that one, just to labour the point slightly. He was able to convince all of his leaders that he had their best interests in heart. So that when he called them out for not actually conducting something well enough, they were able to receive that feedback so much better because he was able to build up this relational equity with them because he was able to demonstrate that he cared about them and wanted something good for them in the future. The last one I'll touch on, this is a good one, deliberate action. This is super useful for any organization that has an interaction between human and machine. Pulling of levers, reading of dials, pushing of buttons. The Japanese have been doing this really, really effectively in their rail system and almost eradicated errors and lapses when it comes to their safety culture. Now, there is a bunch more. As I said, this is just a little taste test, a little teaser to encourage you to go pick up the book and actually read it yourself. Now, this wouldn't be a balanced review if I didn't talk about some of the limitations that I could see when reading Turn the Ship Around. Now, the first one that I'll talk about, it's basically about the state that the Santa Fe was in when he chose to make these changes. It is so much easier to conduct revolutionary change to a model when your backs are up against the wall. You will get so much more rope if you're a part of a company that's got a 3-month cash flow runway left. You are allowed to swing for the fences to try and change the long-term trajectory of that company. Now, compare that to how much leeway you'll get if you're part of an already successful, already profitable company that's worth $1 trillion. Yeah, you're not going to be conducting this revolutionary change to make what for them would probably only be a 5% or a 10% difference. But something that has already got really low expectations, you have this freedom of action where you can go and get after something like this. Because what's the worst that can happen? You just fail again in a different way the following year. There's a few other limitations, and Mark identifies them as well. And so I'll just read this quote, and we'll see if you can figure out exactly what I'm talking about. I was confident in the support of the chief of the boat, the cob. As the senior enlisted man, he was organisationally committed to supporting me. I liked all of the applications because I said that they could be applicable outside of a military context. Yet the military context is all over this, and he's just highlighted is the people that he's in charge of are obliged to follow him. They're in this really strict hierarchical structure at which everyone is required to follow his directions. So the same authority that he would have as a leader-follower model, where he would come up behind someone and tell them to push a button, pull this here, half-mast on this, he can use that exact same authority that he already has to go and force them, if you will, to follow his new leadership model. Now, he can't change the culture and the attitude towards things, but if you act something out for long enough, then eventually you'll get there. But he can also charge them for insubordination if he doesn't like how they're going about it. In comparison, I don't know if you've ever tried to lead volunteers. It's a nightmare because they're there giving their own time, and so you feel like you can't provide criticism, critique, and correct some of their actions. And you're like, guys, can we just embrace a little bit more excellence in this? Like, can you arrive on time? Because I've got this roster thing that I'm trying to work with. So us doing that type of revolutionary leader cultural change, we probably wouldn't be able to do that in an organization that relies on volunteers or that doesn't have a really clear hierarchy built into it. A really flat model, I think that would be challenging. And the last point, it's similar. It's just to acknowledge change is hard. Cultural change can almost feel like it's near on impossible. People are just so resistant to change. It reminds me of a quote that I had a senior leader in my organization introduced to me. And it's a quote from Machiavelli. Now, we'll reserve our judgment on the individual and his motivations. However, this quote is quite applicable in this situation. And the quote is, "It must be remembered that nothing is more difficult to plan, more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to manage than a new system. For the initiator has the enmity of all who would profit by the preservation of the old institution, and merely lukewarm defenders of those who gain by the new one." It's an acknowledgement that momentum is difficult to overcome. Change is hard. People are resistant to change. And I've seen that myself when trying to introduce new programs where people push back and why am I doing this? This sounds tacky almost. And you're trying to convince them to, hey, let's buy into this. This is the vision. This is what I'm picturing. And you get them to try and read something like this. And it takes a special kind of person to want to pick up a non-fiction book and read that. And that's probably the next point. Say I've convinced you and you like some of the stuff going on here and you're like, yeah, but Nick, am I really going to pick this up, this non-fiction book, and read about this story? And my advice to you would be, is no, don't do that. What I do for most of my non-fiction books, and it's my little secret sauce, is I lean heavily into audiobooks. Basically, every non-fiction book that I ever read starts off as an audiobook. If it meets a certain threshold and I'm really interested and I would like to tag things and underline a whole bunch of stuff, okay, that's when I might then double down on it. What do I care whether I'm spending $30 twice over? I'll double down on it and actually go buy the hard copy version of the book after having already listened to it completely as an audiobook. Now, the thing that's a little bit different about Turn the Ship Around is that consistent story arc. It's actually a really readable non-fiction book. It's not jumping between abstract different ideas or different philosophical thoughts, like I said, with random stoicism stuff filtered into it. No shade on Ryan Halliday, I read his stuff as well. But that clear story arc, you become invested in the story. You want to know, is the Santa Fe going to get away on time? Are they going to complete their maintenance? Is higher headquarters going to realise all of the rules that he's breaking and come down and punish him for it? Is Sled Dog going to come back from his AWOL trip? For that reason, it actually becomes a really easy physical read. But either way, I would encourage you, if you're new to nonfiction or if you're just not quite sure or if you've got a big commute to work, absolutely grab the audiobook. Now, if you want a free version, there's a link in the description to a 30-day free trial for Audible. Now, full disclosure, that is an affiliate link, so I may receive some money if you click on that link. But that is an easy way to actually go and give this a go. Now, perhaps one of the most impressive things about the leader cultural change is that it outlasted Marquet and his initial crew. He was only aboard for 3 years, yet for 7 years after he had left, the USS Santa Fe was still winning best submarine in the fleet. There is something about it that stuck around, and I think that is critical as a litmus test for the actual validity of the culture that you're trying to instill. I think that's a critical question for us to ask ourselves. Am I building a culture that relies on my presence to execute? Or am I just creating a system, a way of doing things, a way of thinking about things that will outlast me? The critical question is, would the output be the same if I wasn't here? And if the answer to that question is no, well, that's an indictment on me. I need to do better at instilling vision. I need to increase people's organizational understanding. I need to teach them to think like me. I need to make myself replaceable. And I think that is a really good measure of the leader culture. And that, my friends, is why I believe David Marquet's book, Turn the Ship Around, is the single best leadership book that I've ever read. Let me know in the comments below. Have you read this book? And is this the best book that you've read on leadership? If not, you tell me what the best book on leadership is that you have ever read. What's been the most impactful book that you've read on leadership? Whichever one gets the most votes, I promise you it will make it to my TBR, and I'll probably feature it on this channel. Until next time, ciao.